think something good, right? Yeah. What's up? Huh?
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Alethea Baptist Church, ready for Sunday school morning. Today's lesson is going to be on the fall of Jericho, the book of Joshua. Interesting book. I read this book about 3 times. It got so good to me. And I have a little Bible study with some other guys, and so that's why I got saved with Sunday school. So we've been going through this thing and had some interesting studies, and I learned a lot. Open this up with a word of prayer. Dear God, just thank you for this morning. Thank you for just your word, dear God. And I just pray that you just bless us, dear God, and bless others. And people in the pastor preaching today, bless him, dear God. And just open this up. Just studying your word in the name of Jesus. Amen. Joshua, we're in the 6th chapter. Read 6 to verses 1 to 2 to 20. We're going to do a little bit more than that. This book is so good. I've learned so much. Okay, read it first here. Joshua 6:1. Now Jericho was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out and no one went in. The Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and the valiant warriors. You shall march around the city, all the men of war circle the city once. You shall do so for 6 days. And 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day ye shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the horns. It shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout. The wall of the city will fall down, and the people will go up, every man straight ahead. So Joshua and the sons of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. Then he said to the people, go forward and march around the city, and let the armed men go on before the ark of the Lord. And it was so that when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord went forward and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark while they continued to blow the trumpets. But Joshua commanded the people, saying, you shall not blow, you shall not shout, nor let your voice be heard, nor let a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I tell you, shout. Then you shall shout. So he had the ark of the Lord taken around the city, circling it once. Then they came into the camp and spent the night in the camp. Now Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while they continued to blow the trumpets. Thus, the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did so for 6 days. Then it came about on the 7th day that they rose early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. Only on that day, they marched around the city 7 times. It came about at the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city shall be under the ban. It and all that is in it belong to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom she sent. But as for you, only keep yourselves from the things under the ban, so that you do not covet them and take some of the things under the ban, and make the camp of Israel accursed and bring trouble on it. And one person's going to do that. All the silver and gold, and the articles and bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted, and priests blew the trumpets. And it came about, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, that the people shouted, with a great shout, and the wall fell down, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. Let's read a few more verses here. They utterly destroyed everything in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. Joshua said to the two men who had spied out the land, "Go into the harlot's house and bring the woman and all she has out of there, as you have sworn to her." I'll stop right there at 22. Okay. Interesting story. How did Israel get to this point? Okay. What kind of government did they have? Did they have kings, presidents, or whatever? They had God as their governor, in a sense. God, to the nation Israel, it's the land. Today's time, to us, it's the rapture. We're not heading to the land, but it's the promise from Abraham. Again, to the Jewish people, to Israel, it's all about the land. God developed his people since Exodus, developed his nation. And in Exodus, that Pharaoh, and that king over there, whatever, very powerful. You know, he was like the superpower of that day. And God chose that place to develop his nation. They grew and grew and grew. God delivered them out that nation, and God was teaching them. But the one thing that they were always missing of his nation was to go to the place of milk and honey, where Joshua is right now. Okay. And again, our place is not land. We're in the church age, the time of grace. Our time is to rapture of the church, or die and go to heaven, get to the bema seat, and live out our lives and come back during the millennium kingdom. Okay. So during Egypt, God displayed himself with miracles, and they should have developed so much faith on all the things that God did. He destroyed all their gods, so they should have looked at all the small g gods as something extremely small, but they didn't. When they did, it was very short-lived. So God, with the Passover there, through the Red Sea, where one side of it, he just built up the stuff, and millions of people, a couple million people walked through on dry land. Then he tried to develop their faith in the wilderness. Okay? When they first got across the Red Sea, they was praising God, but it was short-lived. They didn't develop the faith they needed. The reason why I'm going through this here, because they needed to develop that faith before they went into the land of milk and honey. And they complained, they murmured. And let's compare this to the church today. Where are we at? And comparing to this story, is our faith being developed? How do we develop our faith? Do we delight ourselves in the Lord? Do we seek God, study him, seek God so he can reward us? Do we find joy in the Lord? And I'll tell you, that takes studying, putting God a strong priority. And how can I ask God for things when I'm not developing faith in him? And also, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. But God's a perfect person to correct me in my mistakes. I'm saved, believing in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So I'm in the sanctification mode. I'm living down here. And I'm growing down here. And I should never stop growing until I get my glorified body. And I should be growing more and more, living God with more and more of my heart, and loving others as myself. And when I make a mistake, hopefully I correct it soon. Or I'm living to the point where God will chasten me and then correct me. I don't want to live down here being a habitual sinner. Saved, but being, because we fight against Satan, the world, and the flesh. Satan, this is his kingdom down here. The world, or his people down here. The flesh, as a saved person, I make a choice. And through TV, through media, through other people, with my old nature, I can be attractive by this world. And if I'm not developing myself in faith, I'll fall into that. So I got to keep enough God in me. And that's where God was trying to get his people Israel right now. Trying to develop them in faith. And he did an awesome, godly job trying to develop them. But their flesh, it was short-lived. They didn't do it. And so he goes to the wilderness. They kind of messed up. All kind of things happen. They can't go through all the stories. We don't have that much time. And then they get to a point where even they were so bad that even poor Moses got so frustrated one time trying to exhibit God to them, struck something twice, which he wasn't supposed to do that, and that was so important to them, he couldn't go into the land of milk and honey. And all this stuff here was to prepare their hearts and mind how to worship God, to go into the place of milk and honey. And their faith was so bad that when they sent spies in there, and that spies was just for them to go in there and say, we got giants, we got this and this and this, but the place is good. Their faith was so poor that all those people are there and they didn't develop their faith. You know, they didn't have a biblical worldview. Okay, they didn't have a strong desire. Hey, God's got our backs, and they didn't have like kings and whatnot. Then they had God. I mean, God was telling them, "I got you." They said, You know, them people are big. God, them people are bigger than you. I think they can beat you in the arm wrestling competition. You know, so God said, he reacted. All the times he tried to develop faith in them, he reacted to that. I said, I got something for you. Moses, I got to have a little talk with you. You know, side pool right here. I'm sick of these people. I done all this stuff for them. I'm going to get rid of them, and I'm going to develop the nation through you. And then Moses said, hey, God, the other people are going to see you as not too good. So God says, okay, y'all go out in the wilderness for 40 years and kill them all off, develop some more. So that happened. So now, and Moses, remember the strike the rock twice? You can't go, buddy. Okay, I got you. You got it. I'm just Moses here. So Joshua became the next person to take over Moses' place. And again, it's a theocracy, is that right? When God's in charge, he's talking verbally to Joshua now. And now Joshua was preparing these people to go across. And before, now these people here, they got to get baptized like the people out of Egypt. They went through the Red Sea, they got to go through the Jordan. So they have a little talk with them, all that stuff there. And they're going to the promised land to take over all the section that God has. Now this world then, Satan is the king of that world. But God's going to put his part in there. As long as these people worship him, the people are going to see who God is. And believe me, all these other pagan Gentile nations, they knew who God was. Because you can ask Rahab. Rahab, she was one talking about faith, and General McCollum, he did a good job the other day talking about faith. It was Hebrews, anybody remember that verse? Yeah. Anyway, did a good job on faith. And so we got the people, they're getting ready to come across down there, and they got to go across the Jordan like the Egyptians went through the Red Sea. They got to go through the Jordan. So he takes them through the Jordan, and lo and behold, faith, they forgot something, because they can't be going around and them 7 times, and the last time 7 times around the Jericho without approaching God properly. And you know what they forgot to do? Circumcise. Circumcise was a covenant with God, like an outward expression where their hearts were with God. The males had to be circumcised. And none of those people, for those 38, 40 years, they did not get circumcised. And they should not have to wait like 38 years to get circumcised. They crossed over and they were in just north of the Dead Sea, Gilgal, or something like that. And so they had to get circumcised. And the proper time for the Jewish boys to get circumcised was 8 days after they were born. That was by the law, the Levitical law. And lo and behold, they did not. So they had to get the flint knives out and circumcise these grown men. And they had to wait a few days to get healed up again. Them guys were sore. So yeah. So that's where our story is, you know. And they were in manna before, and when they cross over, they're going to be off the bottle, the manna bread, so to speak. This land of milk and honey was, God owns this land, okay? And God can give his land to anyone he wants to, okay? And Matter of fact, the nation Israel is the only people that the land reacts to. When the other countries was in here before Israel came to the land in 1963, I think. It didn't work. Now that they have it, that land is prospering. Okay, but because of their faith, they're still trying to find the Messiah. But God's conditional and non-conditional covenant, He's still working with Israel. And Israel will not come to Him until the midterm and tribulation. No. So, now, back to the story here. So, 6:2. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go around about the city once. Thus shalt thou do in 6 days. Let's talk about the city a little bit. It's about, I heard, 7 acres, 10 acres inside. They have 2 large walls. Jericho was about one of the oldest cities there. It was in the central part. I think they did central, southern, and northern as far as conquering the land. They never conquered all the land that they could have conquered. The people inside that place, the Canaanites, were some bad people later on. We'll get some detail about them. I have one question. Was later on when the walls fell down. Okay, if the walls fell down, what happened to Rahab's place? Did it fall down there too? Because everything fell down flat. We'll talk about that in a second. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram horns, and the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow with the trumpet. Is this a way that natural people fight a war? We got a war with Iran. We're going to go over there and have airplanes fly around the city. That's only what a God can do, the Creator God. This is how He fights the war. If you turn back to Joshua 5:13, Joshua met somebody. And says, now it came about when Joshua was by Jericho, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man standing opposite him with the sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, Are ye for us or for our adversaries? He's a tough guy. Who are you? I'm getting ready to do something for God here. Who you with? He had a lot on his mind, okay? And he didn't recognize who he was talking to. He said, no, rather I indeed come now as a captain of the hosts of the Lord. And all of a sudden, Joshua recognized something. He said, uh-oh. And Joshua fell down on his face to the earth and bowed down and said to him, What has my Lord to say to his servant? This was God portraying Himself in the Old Testament, and He was one holding the sword. Okay, He was the one that was fighting His battles. This was something he had to learn. And one important thing was that Joshua, when he was doing this, and God wanted to get to His people and have faith in this God, and God was their governing. He was the person that's head of all of them. He was the one speaking to Joshua. And God even told him at one time, and I think Solomon, he messed up with this. God did not even want them, because He didn't even want them to get secure in having like machine guns and F-16s, i.e. Chariots or boat, just weaponry of that time, horses. And He said to even hamstrung horses. I said, what in the world is a hamstrung in a horse? And that's to make a horse where he is unable to fight in the battle and to burn the chariots. Normally, hey, we got some weapons here. We can take and use these for other wars. God did not want that. God wanted them to depend upon God to win wars. And you come check with me and make sure you're right. And later on in AI, that was the next place they were going to go to. Joshua messed up a little bit. And he didn't completely check with God. And later on, we're going to see, we're going to go into this place right here. And God, we read already where there was a ban, which means they're not supposed to take all this stuff for themselves, because this was the first conquering city of Canaan, the land of milk and honey. And this guy here, his flesh got to him. He's seen all that gold and stuff. He says, he looked left and he looked right. And he says, I can have me some of that stuff. I can do something with this here. His flesh got to him. And his ability to see how powerful God was not with him, even though he was marching around this place here. You know. So when they went to go battle there, and Joshua should have checked with God. Hey, God, have I checked off everything? Because there was something hidden. And Satan was using an interior attack to stop God's warrior. And they messed up. And then Joshua had to back up to find out, hey, what's going on here? How come we didn't defeat this stuff here? God, you got something messed up there. You need to go correct that out. And he went in there and he checked it out. And he had Achan, that was his name. Him and his family paid a very deadly thing for doing what they did. So, yes, this is not the way to fight a battle normally. Normally, you would bows and arrows, you would run up there, rams, and knock down the gates and all that stuff there, but not with God. You know, it's a miracle how he's going to take all these. And like the Israelites were not that strong of warriors and whatnot, not compared to the people in Jericho inside there. And remember Rahab, how she was talking like, she had faith. She had a correct biblical worldview, and she says, "Hey, they're all scared of you, God." He's telling the two spies, they're all afraid of you in here, you know. And it shows the grace of God. Imagine what would have happened. That was just one person and her family out of all those people inside Jericho. You know, they could have been saved if they produced that type of faith in God, but they didn't, and they suffered. He said, "No, rather did thee come now as captain of the hosts of the Lord." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down. So that was who was fighting his battles. That's number 12 here. And Joshua rose early up in the morning. The priests looked up the ark of the Lord, and the seven priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, but their reward came after the ark of the Lord. The priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. Now, what are the people? I know they're looking outside, you know. What are they thinking? This is not how you fight a war. We heard about them. We heard what happened in the Red Sea. We heard all these stories. And also, it was miraculous how they went through the Jordan River at that time. That was the time where that river was extremely high. So they were saying, we know where they're camped at now, but they're not going to get to us now because the river is too high. And lo and behold, God. So they're trying to figure this thing out. You know, what in the world are they doing? They keep marching around here and they're blowing these horns. And what's going on here? What is God trying to do? But they're not coming out. They're just locked in these doors. And at that time, sometimes they had enough wheat and all that stuff to stay in there. They could have stayed in there for months, maybe even years. They had a spring in there. So they're saying, hey, we got times on our side, they thought. But they didn't know they were fighting against not just those men outside, but they were fighting against God who promised them this land here. And again, why didn't they fear the Lord like Rahab, a prostitute? And the second day they could pass the city once and return into the camp, so they did 6 days. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day and could pass the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they could pass the city 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein. The Lord, only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent." how much God delights in the faith. That tells me where I got to ask myself, where is my faith at? What kind of priorities do I put on God? She was a prostitute, you know. You know, am I developing? Can I have that kind of faith? And I think we have way more than they have. We got this history where we're not believe every single word of the Bible in the Old Testament. This story here also, you know. How is my faith developing? You know, how does God see me? You know, and it seems like that we fall away from sound doctrine, and a lot of people do not maintain a good biblical world view. Balak was their god inside Jericho. This Balak guy was a bad, he was pretty bad. He was a statue in there. And later on, they're going to go in there and they're going to wipe everybody out. Donkey, mules, ox, and sheep. People. They're not leaving nothing in there alive. Okay? So I'm saying, like, that's kind of hard, you know? But these people in there, when they died, where did they go? Because they did not know God. They went straight to hell. And also, the influence that they're going to have on other people. You know, so this place here was extremely dangerous. You know, they were into they had the temple of prostitutes. They were into that, and the statue they had in here was a metal thing with hands out here, and people would bring their babies in there and sacrifice their babies. They would bring them through the fire, and they would heat this thing up to kill the babies, and God hated that. He was even saying there was other parts in the Bible where there's verses, I don't have much time to read that now, but where God says that people who do that with those babies should be stoned, and if the people who don't do that, they got something with me, and they need to get punished also. So that tells me today, with our abortion rate in the millions, and they got Christian people who support that with their vote. You're voting against God. And you don't know how extremely God hates that sin. And he was talking about people who kill babies need to die. I will not support anybody who says, I believe in abortion. I knew some preacher guys had one argument with one guy who says that women has the right to kill that child, you know. And God tells me no. And I pity that person's faith who does that, and I pity that person who votes and support that kind of stuff when they meet God, if they meet God. You know, I start saying, are you saved? Are you carnal? You know, are you a carnal Christian? I can't see any Christian supporting killing babies. And my time is almost, I gotta run here, y'all. Okay. So Rahab, so much faith that she had. And ye in any wise kept yourselves from the accursed thing, lest ye make yourselves accursed when ye take of the accursed things and make the camp of Israel accursed and trouble it. But all the silver and gold vessels and brass and iron and consecrate unto the Lord, they shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the priest blew with the trumpets. And they came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the walls fell down. Okay, accursed. Okay, this is the first. Jericho's the largest city in there. The first, God has a priority. The first things belong to God. You know, that tells me now I got to have a priority in God. My money, God gets the first. Okay, my time, God gets the first. You know, my priorities, God gets the first. Because how can I approach God in prayers when I have friends that have physical needs or spiritual needs? I want God to listen to me. And if I'm not about putting God first, how can I ask God for anything? You know, got to put God first in this church here. You know, and God has blessed me richly, not because I'm great. I'm just a sinner saved by grace. But I do find in my life that once I put God first, you know, matter of fact, He even chases me, and I react to it, and I thank God for that. You know, and being humble puts God first, and not to put myself first. I'm not great at all. God is. God's word is. And also putting God first in studying his word, I'll say it's a sin if you don't open that Bible up daily. It's a sin if you're not teaching your kids that. It's a sin if you're not teaching your relatives that you know sharing the word, and if they won't hear your word, get on your knees and pray. And my time is almost up here. But so the people shouted, and they went in there, and God rewarded them because they did exhibit some faith. But again, this faith here was short-lived, and eventually they even said, we don't want a God no more. Okay, we want a king like everybody else. And that's a whole different story. Again, this thing here is develop yourself in God. It's an excellent story. And Joshua, he worshiped God. Messed up a little bit, and God corrected him. He was right on it. That's my life, seeking God. And with that, I got a complete story because I'm about a minute over. And Steve didn't even give me that 5-minute or 1-minute thing back there. I enjoyed y'all. God bless y'all. And I pray God just bless the rest of this day in the Leap Baptist Church. And Don Reid, my pastor, he can preach, y'all. I'm looking forward to him. Thank y'all.